they were dealing with technical debt issues. Some of it was simple things like huge chain of dependencies, things that we relied on in our technology stack. Well, all that had updated and it broke everything. Or security scans that showed a bunch of vulnerabilities. Well, they had to fix all those. Or, an old database technology that needed to be replaced because it was no longer supported. So we had to replace it. And so that's what they were. It's not that they were goofing off. It's not that they weren't doing important things. They were actually doing critically important things. But it wasn't customer facing. It wasn't creating value. It was just stealing away value. And so when I
just creating sustainability. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
And welcome back to the Money, Mindset, and Mentoring podcast. We've got Christian Hammer here from Vala. And man, I love what you're doing with the idea of reducing technical debt for software companies using AI. One of the most interesting things when we first had this conversation, I was like, I think I know what you're talking about. But I bet you right now, by the end of it, I'm going to know for sure. So welcome to the show, Christian. Really appreciate having you.
Hey, Steve, thanks for having me on. And technical debt is one of those things that's even within our own industry, people talk about, and they are talking past each other. They're talking about different things. But in its simplest description, technical debt is just past decisions that we regret now that we put into technology. So your business plan changed, or you were being expedient because you wanted to get something out fast. You're trying to get your MVP out the door, so you're moving fast. Or you weren't worried about scaling, and so you were just going fast and doing stuff. And you made a decision, you wrote it into code, or you implemented it in technology, and now it's a bad decision. You look back and go, dang, I shouldn't have done it that way. I should have done something else. So we help you unwind those past decisions and start to move forward again.
Beautiful. If I were going to take it into the term of somebody who's not in the tech space, would that be similar to when I look at my file structure, say in my Dropbox, and I have all those orphan, where I have Steve's favorite pictures, and I have about 18 different spots where I've put that in there, and I create another one because I can't find the last one. Is that sort of along the same lines?
Yeah, that would be one distinct form, right? Like I made a decision at this point in time to put it somewhere. I forgot where it was, and I created another version. But another version also could be, I've got 18 pictures of him. I add another picture of him that's a duplicate of a previous one, or I add another picture of him that's totally different. And all those previous ones are stupid. They were when he was being a goofball, and I need a serious one. It can actually manifest itself in so many different ways, which is why it's so misunderstood in the industry. When people talk about technical debt, they're often talking past each other. So I say, I've started to switch a little bit how we talk about what we do. Because most of what creates these problems for ourselves is that I'm trying to go fast. I'm trying to break things. I don't have a complete picture. And so I make a mess. And our job is to come along and clean up the mess. We're almost like the janitorial services of technology. We come along and we clean up your messes so that you can continue, to make the next mess.
So the idea of when you were in grade 6 or grade 5, and you might have said, Mom and Dad, when I grow up, I want to be a janitor. You finally realized that dream.
Yeah, that's right. I'm there. I've reached the summit. I've got exactly what I wanted to be. The amazing part to me, and one of the reasons that we decided to tackle this particular, I slay this particular dragon, as we were saying earlier, right? The reason we decided to do that.
Dragon, just a second. Dragon from Cardone's office. This is a call out to you for slaying the dragon on the last call. It was hilarious. Anyways, back on.
Yeah. So the reason we decided to slay this dragon is it's the thing. When I got into software as a small kid, and I was growing up thinking I was going to be an architect, not a software engineer or a technologist, right? Because that didn't exist yet. Well, it did, just not as big a deal, right? And when I started getting into it, the reason you get pulled in is the creative piece. You're like a wizard. You're in a world that nobody else understands. You're speaking in a language nobody else gets, and you're able to make magic happen that nobody else can do. And that creation of something was what was drawing me in. And I think most people that end up in that world, that is exactly the same story, right? They found that they could do things others couldn't. It was exciting. The reality of the explosion of the importance of software development in the world, because every company has, dozens, if not hundreds and thousands of software engineers, is that it drifted away from that. Like when I first started my career, if you were the technology guy, if you were the computer guy, you were it. There was one of me, right? Over time, it became more important. There was many of me. Once there was, things start fraying a little bit. You get specialization. You have some people that are focused on just the hardware, and some people that are focused on the network, some people that are focused on the database, etc. And every time you do that, now to get anything done, you need a bunch of different people talking to each other. And when you were a kid and you played that game of telephone, right, it gets lost in translation sometimes. And I think that's where it started to happen. But over time, it grew and grew and grew until, I'll give you an example of like the worst case scenario. I was brought in by a company to be their CTO, and it was a joint venture between two giant companies. And the reason that they were looking for somebody to come in was for the previous 6 months with 150 software engineers, not a single feature had shipped. In the previous year before that, only one had. So in 18 months, one feature had shipped with 150 software engineers. And that's just, that's nuts, right? Like that should never ever occur. And so
can I ask what they were doing?
They were dealing with technical debt issues. Some of it was simple things like huge chain of dependencies, things that we relied on in our technology stack. Well, all that had updated and it broke everything. Or security scans that showed a bunch of vulnerabilities. Well, they had to fix all those. Or, an old database technology that needed to be replaced because it was no longer supported. So we had to replace it. And so that's what they were. It's not that they were goofing off. It's not that they weren't doing important things. They were actually doing critically important things. But it wasn't customer facing. It wasn't creating value. It was just stealing away value. And so when I
just creating sustainability. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So that's when I started this company, I actually wasn't originally trying to slay this dragon. I actually was building something adjacent, but I ended up building a tool that solved this problem for me because personally, I had a bunch of projects that I was like, oh man, it'd be really cool if I brought this into the world again. I couldn't because of all those issues. Like the technology was outdated, the old dependencies that broke things, all kinds of security vulnerabilities. And I was like, I don't want to deal with this. So I built a tool to fix it for myself.
And did it work?
It did relatively well, not as well as the new version does. Like when you bring on a team of really robust, really strong engineers, they do a much better job than a old hacker like me. But yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. With the so when you look at the size of a company that is going to be looking at something like this, are we looking at somebody who is, a large multinational kind of corporation? Are we looking sort of that founder-led startup who gets to that second round of VC funding, and they're like, okay, now we got to go back and fix all our bootstrapping? Like, what is that sort of client that you're looking for?
It's a great question, and it's one that we identified almost from the beginning. Because where's the problem the largest? Where's it the most painful? It's going to be large multinational brands. And I say that very specifically because the companies that are not technology centric, it's not actually the product they sell. So if you make and sell shoes, it's important that you have technology, but it's not who you are. Mm-hmm. Right. And they're the ones that often have this problem most profoundly. They have trouble attracting top talent. So they end up making a lot of mistakes. They have trouble keeping talent because, a true technology company will pay more. And so they end up with this problem profoundly, but it's really important that they not have this problem. They feel the pain more directly because it's how they stay close to the customer. And so that's who we decided to focus on. But when we built the tool, it's kind of are you familiar with gelatin and the story of Jell-O? This is going to sound like a silly story, but I got to share it.
It's funny. I have a friend. She worked for a company where she was doing a lot of the chemical analysis stuff around gelatin, specifically for, I think it was the pill use. So it wasn't necessarily in Jell-O, but I'd love to hear this story.
All right. So gelatin used to be this bougie, like you had to be an aristocrat to afford it. Huge amount of labor went into creating it. And that was true for centuries, right? Like the French king, Louis XIV, was one of the few people that could afford gelatin. And it's soft. It didn't hurt your teeth, I guess. I can't imagine something like worrying about food hurting my teeth. But like, I guess in that time period, if you were an aristocrat, you cared about your teeth, right? So nobody could afford it. And then this American businessman automated the process such that it was no longer an expensive item. And now you think of Jello as a product is not a high-end thing, right? I don't go to some high-end French restaurant and pay $200 for a cup of Jello. That would be absurd. So the way that I've approached our product and the team together has approached it is we're solving for the aristocrat because they can afford to pay for this time and space to do it. But it's really for everybody. And we're trying to create heroes within any organization. We're trying to make it so that, Steve, you don't even have to know how to write code. In fact, it's probably better if we can make somebody like you capable of solving this problem for yourself. So you can say, like, I don't need to go hire 50 software engineers to solve it for me. I have the issue. I can fix it myself. I push the big red button that says fix it.
Well, I can write code. I just get ChatGPT to do
it. That's right. Yeah.
And now, speaking of ChatGPT, the idea is you're using AI as a back-end tool to help figure all this stuff out. So talk to me, how does the AI kind of drive the decision-making in this process? And
so
what does it do specifically?
There's a bunch of different things that have to happen. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to have access to their code, right? So they give us access to Git or Bitbucket or whatever they're using. And we scan all their applications that they give us access to and build up a vector. I can talk geek about this and I'm going to try not to, so I apologize for that. But
it's okay, I'll de-geekify.
Yeah, we build up a graph, a view of how these things all interconnect. Ours is called Depths Map, and it says this is how this application interconnects and all the pieces of it. This is not AI yet. Right now, we're just looking through it and figuring out what it does. And then we've got a very robust and very big database of all the security vulnerabilities that are published anywhere. We look at the dependency maps that they have and say, there's 5 newer versions of that. And we have a pretty good idea of what a breaking change looks like. So we have that database, still not AI, right? The AI only really happens when we go from, here's your problem, we need to generate code to fix it. And we have what I think they're now called a large action model, but I called it I called it something else. Mine was called a conducted polymodel application because I had to throw a bunch of words in there. But the idea being, we're looking at the technology that you use, we're figuring out exactly what it's supposed to do, and then we're choosing the best technology, the best model underneath it to solve it. And if we get a bad response from it, because we also write all the tests necessary to make sure it worked, so unit tests and all that get created. If you're a tech geek, you're like, wow, it automates unit tests. Yeah, that's a whole thing, right? So it automates all the tests for you. And then it tests against it. And so like ChatGPT or any of the tools that you can get right now, Copilot and all that, they're pretty good at generating code. They're not perfect. Well, pretty good's not good enough. We're not going to kick the bucket down the road and say, we'll solve it again later. We've got to get it right. So we're testing.
Be creating another client.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you get it so that it goes from the ChatGPT code? Because I've worked with it for Python, and sometimes it does a great job, and other times it gets locked into these cycles of this circle of demise. And so how do you get it out of not running in that circle of demise, but actually, working in a way that's productive? Yeah,
so that's what actually the conductor's for. So there's you could probably see my whiteboard behind me, but you can't see the side that's got the important part. There's a series of things that it's doing while it's looking through the code and trying to decide like how to write tests to start with. So in software development, there's a bunch of different methodologies. One of them is test-driven development. So the idea is you start with the tests. I write the tests first. So we take that approach with our fixes. So when we scan the application and we build up all our tests, we first validate those are correct. So you can imagine, this is actually a form of tech debt, by the way. I made a decision in the past, but I regret that decision. I don't know I made that decision. So here's a good example. A customer on your e-commerce website is in the UK. So I give them UK pricing. But if they're a US customer that's traveling abroad, do I want to give them UK pricing? I might change my mind about that and say, no, I don't. But it might actually have a different problem that hits it, like, I don't know, privacy restrictions, the data that I actually pass around about them. Do I have to then turn off all the cookies because they're a US person in the EU? the decision I make there might be right now legally, but laws change or an interpretation of the law changes because of court, and then I have to change it.
Yeah.
Well, you don't even know that you have that logic embedded in code necessarily, right? So one of the first things we do when we write the test is we ask, hey, by the way, this doesn't look current. Are you sure this is the right decision? So it exposes that to the customer so that they can say.
It's not even just exposing the idea that there's a technical flaw. That sounds more like a functional flaw.
That's correct. It's a business decision, right?
It's a business decision, yeah.
Yeah, because most technical debt is that. We talk about it as a technical problem because it's embedded in technology. It's really not, right? A security vulnerability is not a technical problem. It's a risk. It's an existential risk potentially, right? That's not a technical problem. These business decisions that we embed in code, those are tech debt too. Again, they're not a technology problem. They're a business problem. So we try to make that as visible as possible so you can say, that's incorrect. My favorite, though, is the circular things that occur. You can change your mind and not know that you changed your mind, right? You came in and made that decision. You left the company. I came in and like, that doesn't make any sense. I changed the decision. I leave the company, or I get promoted, or I have a different role. Somebody else comes in and they change it right back. You wouldn't believe how many times that happens. And so when the next person comes in to start working on it, the first question they always have to ask is, I'm upgrading a bunch of stuff. I'm going to give you a new CRM or whatever, right? I start asking the question, like, is this what it's supposed to do? And you say, well, what does it do today? And I say, this is what it does today. And you go, well, that must be correct. That is a common answer when companies do these big, giant migrations. Is it the right answer? Do we know? Are we just pushing tech debt forward? Yeah, we are. And so we're trying to solve that problem. And our tool doesn't quite get there yet. We're not there yet. Like that's a big thing to be able to solve, all that business logic that's sitting out there embedded in all these different tools, but we're working towards it. And the first
call that the bell-bottom effect?
The bell-bottom effect? Explain.
Yeah, like bell-bottoms go out and then they come back, and then they go out and they come back in style, right? And then the next time they come back, but they're a little different every time.
Yeah, I like that, the bell-bottom effect. If I use that with my team, they're gonna be like, no, it's like the hammer pants problem, you know.
Absolutely. Stop it. Hammer time. Hammer time. Yeah. And by the way, I was saying that in homage to MC Hammer, so that is me not taking that. It was funny. I have a video that I have up on YouTube, and I just got a notice from YouTube saying that I'm violating someone's patent, and they sent a patent to me. And it's some patent from like 1990 or something. I used the term mortgage boot camp in that, and I guess the person has a patent on the term mortgage boot camp.
They have a patent on the term mortgage boot camp, not a trademark?
Yeah, they had a patent. Well, I guess that it came from you. I mean, I have no idea. But it's very interesting because then you realize you're actually starting to make it in your videos when you start getting all of this negative content coming back. You're like,
yeah, man, like the best thing that can happen is to start having like Google reach out and say, hey, stop that, cease and desist.
That's right. It means I'm making it.
Yeah,
that's right. Exactly. I just want Zuck to come down and say, Steve, we need to do some jujitsu together. We got to figure this thing out. I'm like, perfect. Let's go.
You know, it's funny with the podcasting thing. It's often difficult because you're often like you might be talking one-on-one with me, right? Yep. It's not like being up on stage. When you're up on stage presenting, you could see the audience responding to you. You can tell if you've got them or not, right? You see the twinkle in their eye. You see them nodding along. This game, you have no idea if you've got the audience at all. You're just hoping. Somebody's please listening
well, that
to
one
this.
Told me I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about your podcast actually quickly, because I think that's something that's interesting as well.
Yeah, it's techtastic. It's that thing to me is really, I love podcasting. So me and a former business partner who had gone through hell together back in like 1990 through 2001, we'd started an incubator that like, if you listen to the years I just said there, not a good time. Like the end of that was pretty brutal. That was the .com bubble.
Yeah.
And we went through hell together. Right. And so in 2008, we started a podcast called Success U. And it was about being a battle-hardened serial entrepreneur and all the life lessons we had learned. And the podcast, because there weren't many, like it was so successful that we just didn't have time to do it anymore. We got pulled away to do consulting work and, got offered jobs and stuff. And so we had kind of abandoned it after, I think, like 12 episodes. That's all we did. And so,
Wow.
yeah, fast forward to just a couple years ago, and I had globally distributed teams during COVID. And I had like, I don't know, 500-600 software engineers, product managers, UX people in India and Germany and all over the world, right? And I realized that I couldn't do an all hands. There was no way to get everybody together. Even if I could, not a good idea. So I said, well, you know what? We're going to do these fireside chats. We're going to talk about what's important. I'll have a different person every chat come on and talk to me and ask their questions. So we'll have a Slack forum where people can ask, they'll manage it and they'll interact with me. And I loved it. I loved doing it. It was so much fun to have that kind of interaction. Well, okay, moved on from that company, started my own. And when I did that, I was like, well, I want to continue this because the best part of being an entrepreneur is connecting with other people and going out and sharing the story of what you're doing. And I love hearing that from other entrepreneurs. I love hearing their stories. It's a great way of bonding with somebody, but more importantly, it's a great way of connecting, mentoring, and sharing. And so Techtastic is that. It's like meeting cool people that are doing cool things and talking about it, centered on technology because that's important, to me, my career, my business, and everything else. And we're 58 episodes in. We're just finishing up season 1 and starting into season 2. We've had some fantastic guests, had a great time.
And I hear, shameless plug, that you've done a migration with some AI in the back end of that platform as well.
That's right. We moved over to podcast.ai. It's a fantastic tool, man. So my producer did some nasty things. He took my voice because it does a fantastic job of creating a voice actor, and he started making some fake ads. And he keeps sending them to me, just screwing around with me. I'm like, no, never erase that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But it's a fantastic tool because some of the things that take the most time are to take your podcast and turn it into a transcript and pull out good quotes and, all that kind of fun stuff. Plus, like if you have sponsors coming in, I'm a CEO of a tech company. I don't have a lot of free time. And so somebody wanting to do a sponsorship, unless they're willing to pay me a lot of money, I'm probably not going to take a couple hours it takes to record it. It takes my voice, writes the script. We didn't even have to write the script, right? That's amazing. Like we just gave it a sentence that says, here's the company, here's their website, use my voice, go. Man, that was amazing. It's a cool tool. I'm doing a better job selling their stuff than my own. But it's fantastic.
I think you did a pretty good job. I think you took a topic that, most listeners wouldn't have a clue what it means. And I think brought it down into very simple terms. It's legacy, it's messy, and it could be data or it could be systems or processes, business rules, and to be able to clean that up like a janitor, make it squeaky clean for the next day. I think that's perfect.
It's also a problem that I always think is hilarious because any company that tries to pay it down, if you're familiar with the painting the Golden Gate Bridge problem, as soon as you're done painting it, you have to start
that
again.
One, but say it again because it's a long time since I've heard that one.
Yeah, so as soon as they're done painting the Golden Gate Bridge, they have to start again because it takes so long.
Oh, that's right.
And these migrations that happen in technology, like, hey, we're going to move to the cloud, we're going to get out of our data center. It takes so long that by the time you're done, the next big hype cycle started and you got to go do that. We're going to migrate from a monolith to microservices. We're going to do blah, blah, whatever the hype is, right? And new executives come in, you get a new CTO. I know I've done it myself. Walk in and go, no, this is all wrong. We're going to do it my way. And by the time we get it my way, the next CTO is already in, right? So it's just this treadmill that just keeps going on, right? And that's where a lot of tech debt comes from too. So if we can speed up the process, so that instead of it taking years to fix, it takes minutes. If we could do that,
that's amazing,
right? Like then you can make those migrations, you can fix the business, and your software engineers, your technologists, your designers, and all of them, they're creating value. They're not sitting there, 150 software engineers fixing things that aren't creating any value. They're actually creating new features, new functionality, new stories, new interactions, new experiences.
Yeah, that's amazing. Because the thing is, a lot of times, if you don't go through and solve that, you're going to have huge problems. Because I know when you're on the sales side and you're reaching out and trying to build and grow, you need new features, you need new value, you need to be bringing things that is current to the market. And if you don't have that, or even worse, if you work on those and then this becomes that monolithic anchor that sinks the whole ship, it can be a huge problem. I think we had that happen once in a company a long time ago with a software where there was a big, huge structure that was done for one design of how data could be shared when you had a limit of, say, I don't know, say 100,000 records. But as soon as you moved into 1 million records, it had to be completely shifted. And then there was all this little legacy stuff that had to keep on changing. You're like, nope, we didn't catch this one. Nope, we didn't catch this one. And that probably would have been a great thing to come in on that one.
Yeah. Well, and most products follow a bell curve of their maturity, right? When you're first starting off, you don't have a lot of customers, but you do have a lot of desire and a lot of expectations of all the things you could do. As you start developing it, you start to hit the vertical climb. You're getting a lot of adoption. You're starting to get a lot of development. A lot of features are coming out. You hit a critical point where you have so many customers that it's actually risky to add a lot of functionality. And so you slow down. You get a lot more careful. The problem with that is you start to lose that growth because the features, functionality, all that is what was getting you more people potentially, right? You're sales led. So you're out there selling the next functionality. That slows down, sales slows down, and then it starts to drop. You start to lose customers. Your ability to deliver new features declines to the point where it's actually negative. You're starting to all I'm doing is fixing broken, and then the product dies. And that's a natural cycle on any product. Cars, it's 2 or 3 years in a model before they have to redesign it and do the whole thing. Software is no different. So the faster you can accelerate that up and the longer you can stay on the climb, the more valuable the product. And by getting a lot of that dead weight that would otherwise hold you back off so you can continue to push that up, just gives you a higher trajectory. It doesn't stop the decline, because one of the biggest causes of that is actually competition. Somebody else comes in, they already know everything they're stealing directly from what you did, because that's the new base. That's the bare minimum, right? They're doing that plus. So if you can maintain your velocity, you can maintain your growth trajectory, and they come in and do that, you can adapt and just continue to climb. If you can't, you're dead. They win.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Now, one thing I thought was very interesting about you, on a slightly different note, is something that I find interesting in some people in the tech space, is where you live and how you live. So talk to me a little bit about the location where you live and share with the users about what it's like to live in the environment where you live. It's very unique.
So I live on an island, kind of trapped between Seattle, Washington on the Pacific coast, on Puget Sound, Vancouver, British Columbia, and then the island of Vancouver that's off the coast of BC. There's a bunch of islands out there. I live on the biggest one. And what's really interesting about it is it's a place where it's rural. I mean, we have horses, we have a little farm, all that. I'm a technologist with a farm. Most of my engineers and a large portion of my team are also here on the island with me, which is kind of odd. My closest neighbor is about a mile away. It's one of my employees, and that was not done on purpose. It just kind of happened. But what happened, I think, because we're so digital in our lives, a lot of us, I think, at least I've noticed this, tend to be somewhat like a neo-Luddite. Outside of work, I don't want technology around me. I don't trust it anymore. I know what happens, right? If you ask an engineer who works on elevators whether or not they feel safe getting on an elevator, every one of them will say yes. If you ask a software engineer if they trust the software running the elevator and they'll get on the elevator, they'll say no. And the reason is largely stuff like the tech debt. We know what happens. We know how the sausage is made, and nobody wants to trust it, right? So live on an awesome island. It's kind of rain shadowed, which is cool. In the Pacific Northwest, it's known for being damp, but we're blocked by the Olympic Mountains on one side. There's a peninsula that sits out there with some very tall mountains. On the other side, by the Cascade Mountains, which are all volcanoes, but they're all very tall also. So the two directions we can get weather, we don't really get it. So we don't get much rain compared to like Seattle gets like 40 inches and we get 17. So it's wonderful on that front. We have a lot of retired Microsoft executives, a lot of retired Amazon executives. The Nordstrom's family's got a thing here. So it's a cool place. The other really cool thing about it that I don't know I shared with you is it's also a lot of artists. So there's a famous artist from the Pacific Northwest that's known for his glasswork, Chihuly. And a lot of the students at the school he taught at for a long time ago live here for some reason. There's like 40 glass blowing studios on an island with only 40,000 people on it, which is nuts.
There's how many?
40 glass blowing studios, like people that have a studio with kilns and all the equipment to do glass artwork. And I'm not talking about bongs. I'm talking about like big sculptural glass pieces, right? They probably have bongs too, but just based on, it's an island in the Pacific Northwest. Of course, they've got fucking bongs. But I'm also a painter. You can kind of see stuff kind of hanging out about here, but you can check that on c-hammer.com. You can see a bunch of my paintings. But there's a lot of artists. Amazing. Here. Kind of cool. Yeah.
So you're like the technical version of a Renaissance man is what you're telling me.
I want to be. I think that what was my grandmother's statement? People who are bored are boring. And I've never been bored in my life. Right?
Yeah.
There's always something. I mean, I'll pick up something that's just sitting next to me because a friend of mine's got a laser cutter burner. So I just made this the other day because what the hell?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. So you try things out, you experiment. And that's actually going back to the very beginning, why did I get into software? I love creation. What difference does it make if it's on a computer or not? I can go build something out on the farm. I can go burn wood and make something of that. I can take electronics. Actually, my thesis project, because I've got a weird degree. I have a degree that is a hybrid between fine arts, computer science, architecture, and electrical engineering. Because
wow. So if you were not married, I'd hook you up with my wife's sister because that's pretty much exactly what she's got.
It's fun, man. Like the question being asked at the time was, how are humans and our future technology going to interface? How are we going to interact with each other? Right.
Yeah.
We didn't have any good answers. Nobody was really like, we didn't have the iPhone yet. We had nothing like it. The internet didn't exist yet. We were still figuring out like, how the hell are we going to work with these computer things? So they put it as a cross-disciplinary effort. And I got to it actually from architecture. I grew up, even though I could program since the time I was in 4th grade, I've been hacking away at stuff. I didn't think there was a career there because it was this weird thing you do, right? I thought I was going to be an architect. I was going to design houses for the rich and famous or something. I was going to be the next Frank Lloyd Wright or, Antoine Gaudi. That would have been fantastic. But I was drawn towards that question, like, how do we interface with these technologies? How is that going to change our future selves? And so my project was this crazy 13 sculptures that were largely just electronics that I put together and gave them personalities. Like one of them was boisterous and wanted your attention. The one right across from it was shy and wanted to hide. But there was a purpose to all of them. 12 of them taught you as the human interacting with it, and more importantly, like the group in the gallery, how to interact with the 13th one. But the 13th one was just a Geiger counter I disassembled.
So what you're telling me is you built the original Five Nights at Freddy's.
I don't even know what that is. What is that?
See, there you go. Now I can show a little bit of a coolness factor on the non-coolness factor. There you go.
Just mic drop on me somehow? Like, did I miss something?
There's somebody in the audience probably giggling about that. That's amazing. Oh, man. Well, Christian, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you and sharing a lot of knowledge around what technical debt is and how can people reach you and if they have projects on the go. And I can think of a bunch of people that as we've gone through this, I'm going to be reaching out to because I know they work for large multinationals and they work in the tech side and I know they need to talk to you. So how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, the best place to reach me personally is at my email address, hammer@vala-ai.com or hammer@vala.biz. The best place to find out about us, vala-ai.com. You can actually go there. You can connect with me there. Also, there's a sign up sheet to get on our We have a private alpha about to kick off, which is already oversubscribed. We have a private beta right after it that we are looking for people to join in on. Then we'll have our public beta that follows pretty quickly after that. And then LinkedIn. I'm CHammer1 at LinkedIn.
Beautiful. Beautiful. MC Hammer 1, you said?
Actually, the funniest part about that is I am CM Hammer. And I used to joke.
Are you
that
really?
Like,
no,
yeah, and it's Christian Michael Hammer. I used to joke that you could.
That's amazing.
I'm like the opposite. You can look at me and tell that.
Oh man, that is amazing. That is amazing. Well, it's been a pleasure, and thank you everybody for tuning in to the Money, Mindset, and Mentoring podcast. We look forward to catching up with you next week. We'll see you soon.